Knows that.
Facilities issue. So I'll speak a little louder for now. So we have done quite a few projects for school districts, and they're listed here. And the purpose of showing those to you is to let you know that we are quite aware of the district's need. And we have been with the district quite a few while, so we know what district has been looking into, what you have done the past few years. Now this is much better. What your need have been, how you think to address those needs, and now going forward, what we should be looking at. Purpose is to learn the process about raising funds through local bond measure. I mean, I'm going to go through a number of different funding sources you can use locally to raise funds. But after all is done and talked about, you will probably see that a bond, one way of shape, a general obligation bond or CFD bond or a parcel tax, whatever, some kind of taxation would be your avenue to get funding for your facilities. Now, first I want to do a process check. Madam President, you need to tell me if you want to go and do the process where I just do my presentation and you talk about them later, or if you want to have questions answered as we go and make it interactive.
I would prefer to do more of a session where if someone has a question, we're free to ask it during the process.
Okay, so interactively. So please feel free to ask questions, and it would be good to ask there and not have to come back to presentation. So I'll be very willing to be interrupted. And if you want to add a piece of information I don't have, please feel free to do that. We will discuss that. What are we going to learn from this process? We're going to find out how to determine your needs. I mean, sometimes you have a known need. In your case, tonight we're talking about HVAC, for example, so you know you have that need. But then when you're going to go through this process of going out to the community and asking for a bond, you may want to look into all the needs you may have now and see what you would, how you prioritize those needs, what you're going to be asking for, and how much. And then districts really are successful in passing bonds if they do a homework up front. And doing homework up front means looking into what you have, what your needs are, how you can address those needs through the existing resources, and only addressing those issues. And if after that you go to community, then community knows that you have done a due diligence, and then you're asking them to take taxes upon them as a last resort. So we were going to talk about what funding sources are potentially available. We're going to look into types of bonds and advantages of each type. And then we'll touch on about running a bond campaign. Now, bond campaign is twofold, and you have no share, no part in doing the bond campaign itself. As a citizen, you can do on your own time, but as a board employee, as district employees, the people in this room probably would not, on the table, would not have much to do with the bond campaign itself. But there's an information campaign which you'll be carrying out, and you will be playing a very, very important role in that information campaign, which legally you're allowed to do. Then, first step is to identify your needs. Second part of that, what we're going to be learning tonight, we're going to be going through that. Anyhow, so how you know your needs? First of all, you need to know your educational program. You need to know what you are doing, what is being taught, what you're going to be doing in the next few years. And you guys have gone through and have done your facilities master plan, so you know that homework has been done already. A discussion with the school principals and some of the key educators have been done. So discussion has happened about where you're going to go in terms of need of facilities needs. Then you have to figure out whether you're going to continue with the same configuration you have at schools. And at this point, it appears the answer is yes, but you never know. You may want to have the conversation. If you are going to be using small learning communities, or you're going to have team teaching, team learning, all those processes which you have to look into before you decide if your facility is going to be adequate for you for next 10 or 15 years to come. Class size standards change, and we have seen that quite a few times since 1996, when class size reduction came in place, and then sizes have changed since quite a few times, and because of that, our facilities, impact of facilities has changed. So you need to be aware of what your district standard will be, not the state standard, but district loading standards will be, because that will change the needs of the facilities for you. The second part is do a need assessment. Now, need assessment is generally a visual inspection of each facility, to go through each school, go into crawl spaces, inspect the windows. No one's talking about doing for the, I guess, energy conservation, but for the modernization purposes, you look into the life cycle of the property of each system. You may have a good-looking building, but you might have internal systems which are failing. It happens school district. You have nice, very well-kept school facilities, but the water system is old, or your mechanical systems are very old and they're failing. So you have to look into that. You have to need to look into the use of technology. How much technology you are going to use, and what is the use of technology you have envisioned for the future. Some school districts are very happy, and especially in urban areas, happy about having technology in terms of choice. How many computers we have per student ratio. But also you need to go beyond and say, okay, what we're going to do in terms of using technology as a medium to instruction. So you're not teaching kids to use computer, you're teaching kids to use computers to learn math, science, English, whatever it might be. So, yes, ma'am.
A question on this in terms of classes and demographics. I know we get a demographic study once a year. Do you have any new information at this time for us about how it looks? Because, for example, I had someone at Glorietta, one of our elementary schools, tell us that the reason that they believe that we don't have a TK class at that school is we don't have any empty classrooms. So I don't know if that's really true, but were you going to share any new information on that kind of thing, or?
Well, there won't be any new information because TK is a new program. We could look into the facility master plan with these two officers that you're working with us and figure out whether we have need for some classrooms, extra space on different campuses. Last time we revised the facility master plan, I don't think we had need to add classrooms. There is another issue which you may want to look into, that you might have some shortage of classrooms on one campus, but you might have access on another. So you want to look into this, see if you want to adjust the boundaries and all that. But that discussion will come down the road. Tonight, for your information, we could look into that just to satisfy your curiosity and see whether we could find a way of either offering TK, if that is program-wise feasible. And secondly, if we need to come back to the board to ask for additional facilities on the campus. So the bottom line is you need to fix this. A very good question you had, Trustee Berger, because now that tells us what we do. We look into what we need in each campus and determine if we have to add facilities, expand them, modernize them, bring technology into them, or do whatever else need to happen to make them more conducive to learning than they have been in the past. Now, one big topic nowadays, statewide, and it might be a topic here too, happen to be, if school district, it's probably not the case in this area, but I was in Ventura County, the district, and school was built in 1894. So, and it's designed from 1894. And they, at time passed, they worked to make it more to their liking. But it's moved a wall and punched a hole here or added some annex there. But it wasn't really a 2100, like 21st century school. So they came up with all the wish list, what they wanted to have done with it, and their cost is running more than 70% of of that replacement cost. So they could, in theory, demolish the school, build that by putting 30% more money into it and have a state-of-the-art facility, which somebody would say the same thing about 100 years from now, which I'm saying about this school. But for now, at least they would have caught up. So that's the dilemma each school district is facing, where, and some school districts have made a decision up front. Now, like in your county, West Contra Costa, they made a decision to not modernize. They made a decision to rebuild each school, reconstruct from scratch. So they have gone through this process for the last 18 years now, yes, or 17 years, and they have built quite a few schools. They still are lacking some in terms of funding to address the remaining schools, but whatever schools they have touched, they have not modernized. They have just replaced it. And in that community, schools were so run down and so poorly kept over the years that it made sense to replace them instead of just having them spruced up and painted and make them look shine, but nothing in there in the process. So you might want to look into that. If after we do estimation, we find out that the improvements you are trying to do to a certain facility is more than 70% or so. That's a rule of thumb. You may have a different tolerance level. You may say, well, 50% or so. But generally, we recommend people to look into 70–75% because that justifies the expense of demolishing it, redesigning it, and reinstalling it.
So are you supposed to make that determination before? I mean, you might be going out for a bond saying you're planning on modernizing, and then as you go through, get approval for that bond, and then as you're going through the process, say, oh, the 70% rule, we should really.
Occasionally that happens.
School.
Occasionally that happens. Generally what happens though, so I will go general and then go occasional. Generally what happens though, you know how much it's going to take, more or less, give or take few dollars, a few millions. You know how much it's going to be to modernize a certain school. School A will take 13 million to modernize. It takes a school in this part of the state about 33 million, 34 million to build. So that school is not going to be something you're going to be looking into doing a reconstruction. However, sometimes it does happen what you said. You go in there thinking you're going to do modernization, and then you remove the panels and you find that there is no walls. I have seen those situations where you find that termites are holding it up by holding hands or something, but there's no way of keeping the building up, so you have to gut the whole structure, redo it, and then you redo your cost, and you figure out, well, you probably better off doing the reconstruction instead of modernization. Sometimes we also get wrong information, old information, new information comes to front. Was in a building, but it was a string of portable buildings in Southern California, climates far, and they did not know. They didn't know there was an old abandoned gas tank underneath. So when you start moving that, doing the modernization, you figure that out. Somehow somebody came up with that information because we do sonic, to find out what the foundations are looking like. And then the whole process changed. Now you have to remove them, whether you like it or not, take the tank out, do the placement of soil and all, and then compact it and reconstruct. It's a very costly process. In another occasion, I have an experience of going in there thinking we're going to do modernization, and then found the water system, the interior systems were completely rotted. And although district plans did not show those, district records didn't show that, they had no complaints. Usually how we figure out if they have a bad system is if we have a bunch of work orders. But if you go in there and you assume there's going to be like any other building we have opened, with one certain building, because of the location, because of the exposure, because of the leaks, or whatever is completely rotted away, then you have to change your mind and do that. But that very occasionally happens. Generally, you do know quite a bit going into it. You have if not exact, you have rough ballpark figures for each.
So
Yes.
I have a related question
Okay.
on that issue of the 70% rule, and since you mentioned West Contra Costa School District rebuilding their schools, I mean, in our case, 4 out of our 5 schools are built in the 50s. So it's not like we just have one school that's really old and the rest of them are more modern. In our case, we have a lot of old schools that need, in some degree or another, upgrading. So I think it's really important that we think about the whole big picture. And just another comment, we have basically ignored our schools. I mean, we haven't gone after a bond, as you know, since 20 years ago. And we've gone after parcel tax, a couple of them, because we wanted to maintain our teachers. So, I mean, I know that, you know, you use West Contra Costa as an example of a school district that's rebuilt their schools. But I think what's really hard is if you were gonna like rebuild a school, how do you choose which one? You can't do them all in one bond measure. You know, we're getting ahead of it, but that's my concern is making sure we talk about what we can do in terms of what the voters would support if
Right.
they do want to go after.
And the whole
one.
process today is we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So
okay.
if you bear with me, by the end of almost end of this presentation, most of your question will be answered, but we will discuss as we go, and at the end we will talk about certain things, including making, you know, rebuild and modernization decision. Generally speaking, this is a board decision. You guys can do whatever you want, but the community affords to pay. If community is willing to pay for new schools, and some communities are, then wonderful. But generally, it would be hard for you to go out and ask the community to take this big burden of debt. Not only that, when we go through the process, you'll find out they may not be even capable of legally. You can ask all you want, unless somebody comes with a big check in an endowment, you will not be able to do that. And talking about big check in endowment, I have seen that happen too. So, you may want to sell names or whatever you want to do, raise funds that way, but that's really is not the way to raise funds for long-term projects. So, if buildings are otherwise adequate for your use, and you are, in your case, you're trying to do one significant improvement in terms of HVAC, most likely it's not going to make economic sense for you to rebuild schools. Most likely. Now, again, I said, personal liking or disliking of the board, and the preference of the community aside. From facilities planning point of view, it would not make sense to add about $3 million worth of project or value added to each campus, give up $33 million to do that, and then put community money of $36 million to get what you want to get, which you can get with $3 million. So it would probably is not going to be something, unless you make a strong case that current facilities are not adequate. Then question would be, if they're not adequate, why they're finding out about that now? Why we didn't know about that before? But I think your facilities in general, and you can disagree with me, Stuart, if you want to, because this is your time to be heard. But generally speaking, your buildings are, with some care and love, could be improved.
Yes.
No comment, okay. I thought, he took a pause and said, well, maybe I stepped into something I shouldn't have.
There's no doubt about that.
Yes, they can be improved.
So
So,
when you talk about a needs assessment, are you talking about our 2008 master facilities plan and then the 2013, you know, redo that we did on that,
Right,
update on that? Is that a needs assessment or is it?
that's a need assessment. You have done a need assessment. You have done quite a bit of work, groundwork already.
But
So I
some of
think
those things have been done since then.
some of them have been addressed, some of them have not been addressed. And some of them you have to look into the operational costs, and just do that too. They would like, if they have ample assessed value, and the community is willing to pay, or if they're fortunate where they have new communities coming up, and they are able to impose some kind of CFDs on the new houses, because new people coming in, generally people living in the community want them to pay their fair share because they're gonna be using schools. So it's easy to tax them than to tax your existing community. So when they come in and raise substantial amount of money, then you look into things like, okay, so HVAC you're gonna add. But would it be better to change windows too, when you're doing HVAC, because now your utility costs are gonna go up, so you wanna somehow negotiate that, mitigate that somehow by improving facilities or by changing orientation, if you are able to raise building, doing certain things which you would not be able to do before. So that's something else comes into play, but generally, those savings, although they are very valuable, they're the general fund, they, over a period of course of life of the project, do not generate enough funding for you to be able to justify raising buildings and rebuilding again. That said, it's again your call. It's the community needs and it's all community specific. What if I need is generally where we fall short in school business, because it's hard to quantify unforeseen, unknown. I understand that. That's why we have to have reasonable contingencies built in the budget, in the budget contingency, project contingency, and the program contingency, 3 layers. So you would be able to go through and deliver all you promised to the community. Otherwise, you probably heard stories where people promise something and then they only get to about 80% of that, and then you never have forgiveness given to you for the 20% you didn't do in the process. So all decision making should be data driven, emotions should be checked out. Then we have reasonable allowance, we talk about that, and then we talk about upfront, what we're gonna do in terms of program management. Are you gonna be hiring a program manager from the outside? Are you gonna be an internal person doing it? Or you're gonna hire somebody to do it on staff? Or, because the different fee structures are gonna impact your cost.
Here,
Yes,
pardon me. So, would a needs assessment that was done 8 years ago be currently adequate?
I don't think
I'm just thinking of technology has changed so rapidly.
I don't think they were done 8 years ago. The 8 years ago, 7 years ago, plan was done, if I recall, and then update was done about 2 or 3 years ago. 2013. So it's fairly fresh, but it could be quickly updated again, because with technology things change so fast. And technology, you never know. I don't know what we proposed in there, what the need was. You may not need as much hardwiring now as you needed in 5 years ago. So we might have, so it could have different impact. But I think it would be wise to look into that and do a quick refresh to make sure you have not left something out.
Thank you.
And also, depending on what bond type you pick, you may need to add some oversight, because generally school districts, we are known for not doing a great job in doing the oversight and cost control. Not you, general community, school community. You still not working?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
So while we're waiting for that, while we're waiting for that, in terms of oversight, I assume you mean an oversight committee, that we have one of those for our parcel tax, so I'm assuming you're talking about.
Well, oversight
That type
committee is only a community, a citizen oversight committee we're talking about. That would be a good idea, if we required, whether you like it or not,
Right.
if you were to do Prop 39 laws. And we'll not talk about that. But it's good to have an oversight committee. On the other hand, you have to walk that tightrope very carefully, because sometimes those committees have a tendency of kind of being a runaway committee, where they decide such things, they have decision-making power. So we have to be clear that decision-making powers reside here, and they would be able to make recommendations and have more. Okay, any other questions? You have gone through
That wasn't the full screen we wanted.
And anyhow, let me continue with, you have the copies here, so let me continue with that, we'll come back and do the catch up afterward. So,
There we go.
so how you, then after you quantify need, almost always your need are going to be more than your available resources. So then the difficult task comes, what you say yes to and what you say no to. Now, certain things which we all know could be, postponed. We are good at that in school business. We learn that a lot about postponing our needs. But what we need to be concerned or be aware of in this process, that doing things piecemeal costs you a lot more than doing it at the same time. So what you want to do, you want to have a whole project, whatever you want to do, go through the painful discussion. Yes, you may end up offending some interest groups, and this is the dilemma with the bond process. Having this discussion always ends up making somebody unhappy. And when you are in a bond campaign, you don't want to make anybody unhappy. So that's where the district leaves some leeway, well, subject to availability of money, whatever. But on the other hand, then you get into a trap if you leave the whole list intact. Then you get in a trap 3 years down the road, people saying to you, you didn't do the whole list. Although you never had intentions or the resource to do the whole list. So I recommend personally, that's my preference, that you do the priority discussion, do tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 projects, and then do your tier 1 first, tier 2 second, and you take in consideration the packaging part, you want to do the whole thing together. You want to make a decision about horizontally phasing it or vertically phasing it, do school by school, or do everybody will get technology, everybody will get food services improvements, everybody will, so you do that horizontally. So you have to make that policy decision as you go in your, we will discuss at the end next steps that you need to follow to do that kind of conversation. You want to look into the future. This crystal ball, yours is as good as mine, but you need to look into that, okay, where do we want to go? And sometimes it will sound like impossible dream, but you never, you 2 years from now, you might not know. But, I have a story to tell you. I was in 1993, in your position, I ordered some computers for a school district when I was CBO. And if you recall those computers, the 386s and 486s, I ordered there were 33 megahertz, used to be 33 megahertz, 63. So I made a decision to, instead of 33 megahertz, do 66 megahertz. I spent about an hour and a half getting beat up by one board member, who thought that I was wasting money. And her comments were, that was 1993. Well, but we are buying computers for NASA? Well, those computers were obsolete in 1995. So you never know what we're gonna go. So you need to be open-minded. Think about what you would need, not what you need today, what you're gonna need needing 10 years from now. Cost-benefit analysis again goes about making a decision about replacing or reconstructing versus modernizing, but also in very different ways. Do you want to do those skylights and bring in natural light? Cost factor, but long-term benefits, not only in terms of fiscal benefits, also in cost saving, also the environment getting better for kids to read and learn. You need to evaluate those as a cost-benefit analysis, both tangible and intangibles, to determine what you want to do. And then, of course, you stay focused on, sometimes people get carried away with, well, neighboring school district has X, Y, Z, so we must have that, otherwise we are not the big brother we are. Well, we need to really figure out what you want to do for your community, not what anybody else is doing. If somebody is going overboard, in late 90s, early 2000s, when Prop 39 first came in place, and they allowed use of money for bonds, some school districts, for equipment, some school districts went overboard. Well, they put less in the facilities and more into computers and equipment and printers and all that, well, you want to keep it balanced. School reconstruction dollars now come from a mix of state and local resources. Federal, I will touch on a couple of resources available federally, but they are generally not very commonly used, and you'll find out why when we talk about it. They are generally loans. And one thing we advise the boards we consult with, do not take loans. I mean, let's face it, general obligation bond is a loan too. But it's secured by the taxes of the community. But if you take a loan which is funded or guaranteed against the general fund of the school district, well, you know what it can lead you. So we usually, generally, or almost 100%, we say don't do that. Now, first of all, state general obligation bond, there's a bond on ballot now, and I haven't done your eligibility. Do you have any new construction or modernization eligibility? The state program? You don't know? You don't? Okay, so everything you do be internally, right? Well, you might have state money becomes available, you may be able to tap into, put your hand in that part of money to get something out of it. For example, if part of that is for technology improvement, or part of that is for, there are 3 or 4 different resources, uses they have specified, however, they may revise the language then.
Yeah, we don't know what the governor's June plan is gonna look like, and likely wouldn't be favorable to districts that are funded like ours. But has there been analysis done on the November ballot of whether we'd be qualified to get funding from that?
Well, eligibility, Stuart tells me now we don't have any, but we can look into that after your new enrollment comes in, we can look into that to see if we can qualify. Like, you mentioned TK.
Well,
if
the
that is-
terms of the November ballot, I just haven't read, it might not be growth. On Prop 39, it was a run to the door, right? Whoever got there first. I'm sure they've done something different, I just don't know enough to know what that is, and it sounds like maybe we don't have a chance even if the cash bonds.
The governor is still balking at,
Oh, yeah, no,
Right. My
exactly,
understanding
but
is
it's
that
not,
we wouldn't.
it's not a
really
done
have-
deal, a lot of people pushing.
that's right.
Well,
The June, we clearly wouldn't, if he gets a June compromise.
Right.
The
It's
November, I
saying
just
that
don't
the
know.
November language, that's not
Right.
that we're going about. What I've heard is that we really wouldn't be, like, we shouldn't be expecting money from
Yeah,
that.
governor doesn't want a district like
Well,
ours.
no,
Yeah, I don't think we would
Like,
have a
we
much
wouldn't
chance in
qualify.
either.
And based on the
state.
2013, update on the master facilities plan.
Well,
if I may give you perspective.
Unless there is technology.
If you give me my point of view from attending state meetings and stuff,
Yeah,
that ballot is going to be on the, that measure will be on the ballot, whether governor likes it or not. Governor tried to make a deal about, okay, you trim it down to 7 or 6.5 billion, and we kind of rejected that, the coalition did. So it's going to be on ballot. Now, governor's approval is not required, because it's a signatures process. His only thing that we are trying to get from is his concurrence. We don't want to go out and campaign against it, because Governor Jerry Brown can do unpredictable things. So we want to make sure that he doesn't go into some kind of tirade where he sinks it, because he has the capability of doing that. If he even stays neutral, the bond going to pass. Now, what is in there for you? There are 2 or 3 things in there for district programs. You probably don't have eligibility, but you may develop eligibility down the road. So I would still say, when we do this, although it's more work, that you develop your plans and turn your application in. The most they can do is to approve the application with 0 funding. But then you get in a line. Someday, when some new bond comes in and they have that provision in there, you get your money back. I mean, in school district system, you can always use money when it comes back. Because you're always going to have a need. Sometimes the community misunderstands. If you ask for a bond, they think, well, we passed the bond 10 years ago, why are you back again? Well, needs are 105 years or so. So you're going to be needing more money, so I would recommend that you when you do your plan, all it takes to fill out a couple of forms and put the application in, It goes somewhere, fine, doesn't go anywhere, no harm, no foul.
So when do people apply for that November ballot? I mean, for those funds in the state? I mean, it seems to me from remembering in the past, and I was on the modernization committee, years ago, back when I was a Florida parent, it seemed like it was the districts that applied first and that had the biggest need, that had priority. So what's gonna be the process for this one?
All of our clients, we are recommending one basic thing. Don't count on any money from the state November
Yeah.
bond.
No, I'm not counting on it,
So,
I'm just asking if we do
Plan
want to apply.
based on local money.
Mhm.
However, put application in, someday it becomes available, great. Or somehow, if, you might have people, there's one other thing, there's some nuance you need to know about. If I build a school and I don't file for reimbursement, whether it's state money or not, within 180 days, my application is out. So there could be approved projects on the list that are not eligible for funding anymore. So we can't sit here and say, well, money is not gonna be available. It might be, but even if, say, the 2016 bond doesn't fund your application, somewhere down the road, it's good to be on a list. You never know, they may say, well, we're gonna do a bond for school districts who are not all, free reduced lunch.
After all, we got federal money that was supposed to be spent and was not, after having state.
So, then you have local property tax, you could do, of course, you collect your developer fees. Some districts have RDAs in the old form and new form, and COPs. COPs is a big no-no unless you have a source of revenue, which is non-general fund. Some school districts have a source of revenue. If you have a CFD or a new community, you can use that source to do a COP, but generally, using bond money would do what happened to Richmond in 1992. So you don't want to go there, you don't want to do that process. So now going down to the one layer down, okay, so if we do a bond, what kind of bonds are available? Well, there are general obligation bond, where the whole community takes responsibility to pay that bond by having taxes assessed on their property. And then there are Melrose bond, it's also called CFD, they come across some community facilities districts, or sometimes they're called slightly different acronyms, but concept is the same. That you do a per parcel tax assessment on a selected community. You can do a district like this, you can do, you could pick and choose, you leave the living communities out, you can leave some low-income communities out, and it's like a Swiss cheese approach, you have little holes in there. But, so you can spread it all over, you can do only 1/3 of the community, or you can do only one certain community, in development or neighborhood. It works for school district where you have a lot of new construction happening. Because you could have them pay, not only for the future schools, also you can assess them premium for the schools you already built with this local money. And then you have parcel tax. Well, parcel tax generally comes in mind, you think about instructional parcel tax. However, there's nothing in law which precludes the board or any board to do a parcel tax for facilities. You could, if community, you need 2/3 vote, it's higher threshold, more difficult to do, especially in a district like yours where you already have parcel tax, or thinking of doing a parcel tax. So debt financing is just a general principle, what you do a bond, the bonds are sold in the secondary market, people buy it, first the primary market, somebody buys the whole bulk from you, you don't want to be in a business of having her sell bonds every day on the computer. So what you do, you take bids from an underwriter, they buy the whole bulk, so you have $15 million of series, they buy $15 million worth of bonds from you. They then charge some premium on it, fees, administrative fee, that's where they make money, and they sell it to the third party. General bondholders. We pay our premiums to the main contractor, and they distribute the premium to, or interest to, all of the bondholders. So it's like having a mortgage, just the mortgage on the whole community. 30 years mortgage, you can do 25 years mortgage, you can do 40 years mortgage. Now some restrictions have come along about how long you can do, but generally it's more you pay, longer period is, lower the tax rate would be, and there's some other factors you have to consider. All of school districts in Chinle, unless they are very new school districts, they have at least some schools built by all local money. Before we centralized the funding process, it used to be all local taxes. When you have, initial days when you have a little schoolhouse on the prairie, it was done by local community. Now that continued, so now until 2000, there was only one, let me finish, I'll come to you, only one way of assessing bonds was available, and that was to go to the community, ask for them to vote for the bond, and then thank you very much. You see my consumption here. Thank you. They're very, very nice. Thank you. There is a two-thirds majority you required then. So if you fell short by 2 votes, you fell short, and that was really a troublesome trend because you could have 2 votes cancelled by 1 person. So education community come back and say, well, we need to have something better for schools who are falling apart. So in 2000, they did Proposition 39. They mean state of California. We passed it. A Proposition 39 that allowed us to raise funds at 55% of the bond. Now, when you go there, then you have certain advantages doing it in an obligation bond, that you have the cost is lower because you are not managing it for yourself. You don't have to hire a third party. You do your sale. At the end of the day, you are done. Then you only have to worry about once a year. So you have to worry about once a year to fight for your rating. Because the rating determines what your bond is rated initially, but also how in the long term your future debt will cost you. So you can issue bonds in series. So even if you get $45 million approved, you can do 3 series of 15 million each, or vice versa, and different combination. You can do that, and then what happens is that you are able to keep tax rate as low as possible for as long as you can. So tax is based on assessed value. We can talk about that. Easier to manage. Not that it counts, but it does, because if you end up adding 2 positions to manage that in-house, you are not sharing with general fund. Now, disadvantage are you require 2/3, and Prop 39 requires 55%. Fund can be used for real property. Now, I have to correct that. My mistake. Prop 39 funds can be used for F&E, furniture and equipment.
What is F&E, I'm sorry?
Furniture, equipment.
Ah, okay. Furniture and equipment?
Yeah,
Does that include technology equipment?
yes, computers, yes. There's some discussion about whether they cover software or not, but there's a way of getting around it. You can buy computers with software installed. So there's always a way of going around.
Question?
Yes.
You can, I understand, refinance from time to time if there's a lower rate out there?
Yeah, if the rate falls significantly, like it did in the last few years, after the recession hit, we used to have high rates and then it fell. So one advantage we had, we had so many bad things happen because of the recession school district. One good thing happened that we had a chance to refinance our debt. And when you do that, so if you were assessing, say, $60 per 100,000 to your local community, that tax may go down to $55 per 100,000 assessment value. It's not benefit to you.
But the voters may think that's a good thing
It is a good thing.
Part of the board, they were to.
It is a good thing, but however, now rules have changed. What other thing happened, which I thought was, from day one, I thought was an iffy thing, and we shouldn't have done that. But we have the bond, the total debt was reduced, so we refinanced it. Like, before recession, we used to refinance and take out money. We started doing that. Well, that didn't work for that market, it didn't work for this market either. So now there's a law passed that we cannot do that. We have to use those savings to reduce taxes to the taxpayers. We cannot raise additional resources, which in fact voters have not authorized. Because we go to voters and say, well, could you authorize $45 million for us to use? And if we do some manipulation and make it 60 million, there's some cushion. So that's what new law now prohibits.
So, excuse me, I have a question a minute ago, and also just on this, I don't think you said it, but the Prop 39 bond is only an even year, which
We
is.
go there. If you just, like I said, if you just be a little bit
Okay,
patient.
wait, okay. But the other thing I was trying to ask a couple slides ago, you said historically most schools were built with general obligations bonds. I was just curious, did you mean before Prop 13? Because that's when,
Before Prop 13.
yeah,
Before
okay.
Prop 13, because, for a while, there was no bond authorized completely. And so in '84, we finally came out to do the bonds, but I'm talking about 1800s and 1900s. There were a lot of initial, first part of the century, the schools were built generally by local funds.
Right,
So
right.
now we have sort of left the track there, and now it made it more difficult for us to, for example, if you live in Orange County,
I'm very aware, I just wanted to make sure.
if you live in Orange County didn't pass a bond until 2004, I believe, local bond. And they were getting all this money based on need, so what they would do, they found out the trick. They will go out, put a bond measure out there, vote it down, and then apply for hardship money. Now, Orange County is not a poor county. So it was actually, reverse of what it should have been. But that's how sometimes things play out.
So to go back to what Stuart was just saying about refinancing, so having had a conversation with our bond guy saying that, we could save like $1 million if we refinance the existing bonds that we have. Is that something that would be something that we should be pursuing?
Yeah, anytime you have opportunity to lower tax interest rate, you should do that, because you have to really keep in mind that there are fees attached to them. So when bond advisor come to you and say something,
Is getting
the
something from it?
unfortunate part is they are selling something that is a benefit. So there's a conflict built in. So you have to figure out how many fees you're doing, what is the present value of the savings you have. And if our present value is not worth, the savings which you are seeing on the table. So, the other general obligation bond has a character. It looks like and sounds like and walks like and talks like a state bond. So generally, when you select in November, you go to bond, there could be state bond is your bond, and people, generally, in my experience, especially older members of the community, vote on the state bond and then they walk out because they wanted to vote for that one thing. They don't care who going to be Republican, Democrat. They were there only for bond to support school, and they end up supporting the state bond, but not the district bond. So it takes some effort there to educate people. And then the one thing about any taxation, people want to see results, and sometimes the results are unrealistic. If you, for example, HVAC, if you do HVAC, people in the classroom will see the improvement. People driving by on the street are not going to see much improvement. So that could be very well confused in terms of whether it's worth doing or not. So a lot of education takes place, which we have to do to make sure people are coming along. Now, to answer your question, Proposition 39 is now, the downside for Proposition 39 is, upside is you have 55% threshold, which is much easier than 66.66. But downside is, and also upside is that you can buy furniture and equipment, which you cannot for 2/3 bond. The downside is that you have to limit how much you can tax. Even if community is willing and able, you can't tax them more than a certain amount of taxation. And we'll go into more in discussion when we talk about your specific situation. And then this is about the CBOC you were talking about, Trustee Butler, having a site oversight, a citizen oversight committee, which requires at least 7 members. People can have more, but 7 are required, and they're very well defined, one from tax law, one from teachers, so you have to go through follow those rules. And then managing them becomes another issue, because having monthly meetings or quarterly, you require a quarterly meeting, but not monthly, but usually they demand for more meeting. So it becomes quite a bit of an issue for you. So like any other community, you will always have an advocate there who will probably asking to do your job for you, but you have to be careful who you appoint. Melrose taxes, like I said before, it could be a Swiss cheese approach. You can do, you can pick and choose. You can increase your chances of passage because you leave those people, the traditional communities who are against bonds, out. Argument would be against it. If I was a citizen, well, they're benefiting from the same thing, but we are paying taxes for. Why you are really encouraging or rewarding the bad behavior? Well, that's a different issue. But technically, you can do it. So, and that shows up on tax law. I'm sure you have quite a few, water districts and so on and so on, the parcel taxes, fire district on your tax law. Same way you're going to have CFD showing on your tax law. The CFD also have quite a bit of flexibility in terms of what you can use them for. So that's why there's some silver lining to it. You can buy furniture, you don't have restrictions, you don't have reporting requirement. So that reporting requirement is not bad, but reporting requirement when you are just doing reporting instead of building is not a good thing to do. Okay, now, CFD, again, is 2/3 vote, and you have to almost always hire, unless you are LAUSD, hire staff from outside to help you manage it.
Happy.
That happens.
Now, 2/3 bonds, now it's also addressing your question, Sarah. The 2/3 bonds are, you can have them on the ballot any time you want. You can decide sitting here, it will be 3rd Sunday of October. Or it will be 2nd Tuesday. You don't have to have certain day of the week. It can be Thursday, Friday, whatever day you want to do. You can choose the mode. You can choose the amount. You don't have restrictions of $30 per 100,000 assessment. You don't have any, bond oversight committee requirement, but you can use money only for construction, and you cannot buy any computers, furniture, equipment, just really hardcore construction. Now, fixtures will be allowed, so if you are doing classroom, the fans will be okay if they're attached. A pedestal fan would not be okay. It's not attached. Attaching to the wall through a wire is not a reason to have it called fixture. So, but the biggest drawback is you need 2/3 majority vote, which are harder and harder to get. On size of the bond, well, now it's getting interesting. So you have, say, and I'll throw a number out, $50 million in needs. Logically, you would think, okay, I can go out and ask the community to give me $50 million. They will say yay or nay, but at least you should be able to ask, but you're not. You have to first see what your assessed valuation is, and then 1.25%, because 2.5% of assessed valuation you can do in taxes, because your elementary school district, you're going to have half of that. So, here, let's go through this. So if you have $3,260 million worth of total assessment within the boundaries of your district of the properties. 1.25% would be about 66.5 million, that's right at the end. So 66.5 million is your ceiling. Now, this is the first hurdle. So you know, you may have need for 100 million, but you cannot do more than 66.5 million. Whether you do general obligation two-thirds or you do 55%, either way, that will apply. Now there's an exception to it. You can go to the state and ask them to waive, state board, and ask them to waive this 1.25 restriction and raise it to 1.5 or 2. I don't know what the last number is, but best contract cost is 5.5 or anybody knows here?
We don't want to emulate.
No.
Yeah, that's not a good
Yeah, we don't
option.
wanna do it.
They're having
They did a
some issues
waiver
with their
with-
bonds.
I know, but they're not the only example. I know that's a bad example, but they're not the only example. There are a lot of school districts, Beverly Hills is an example. I mean, their assessed value is so high, but they want to rebuild. So they have gone and they have asked to be raised, and that's fine. In that community, you know, the property value is going to go up, so eventually going to all get caught up. Anyhow, so this, if you see historically, you have in 2004 you had 3.2 billion, 5.8 billion. The two numbers from here you can look at. Average growth of your property taxes roll, assessed value of the whole community, annually is 5.07%. So your property somewhere, you know, there's one negative here somewhere, yes, in 2011. I remember in 2012, when all the values were reassessed. But generally, and now they are going faster because not only we are picking up 2% of Prop 13 limit, we also doing a reassessment. Readjustment to the market value. You know, assessors are very good about that. They don't want to miss that part. At some point you want them to be confident, but they're not here. So here you have 66.2 numbers going to take from here. And then when you go to the next slide, you will see that if you do Prop 39 bond, now you're restricted to $13 per 100,000, which is the third line here. So now your 66.5 authority becomes 49?
Yeah.
49
Is that
million.
it for a 2/3 or 55% bond, or just on a 55% bond?
55%.
This is
55%.
yeah.
The last one was 66.5 if you want to go there. But 49 million is your capacity to do the bond, only for you. And high school district can do about the same amount if they wanted to. Yes.
You kind of lost me here, sorry, but on the slide before, where you had total value, assessed value, so that's the total assessed value of all the properties in Orinda, am I understanding that?
Right.
Yeah, okay. And how come you started with 2004 there?
Because I wanted to calculate, not I, but I, some associate as the one, I want to thank them for doing that for me. They wanted to give you an average increase per year.
Oh, I see.
So when we make a recommendation, or we get to the point, and we say, okay, use 3.5%, you would not say, because I'm sure if I just standing here say, well, use 3.5% annual rate of growth, somebody from the community will say, well, that's not gonna happen, it's 2%, and
Yeah.
my uncle's not gonna move, and my aunt's not gonna move, and all that, you know, personal discussion will come in. But
Right,
I'm telling you, as a whole, as a community,
yeah,
although you have a lot more older community than other districts in your neighborhood, you still are doing about 5.7%. So
Okay.
if we come to you and say 3.5, which I'm gonna be saying in other slide, if you look at, we're saying at 3.5%, this is the little footnote here, at $30 per 100,000 assessed valuation tax rate, at 3.5, assumption of 3.5 increase every year in your property on average, you will be able to borrow $49 million.
and this is, you just came up with this because it's a reasonable amount. If we were going to want to go after a bond and do all this, we would have, you know, additional research into this, or what?
Well,
Is this an example?
This is the maximum.
It's our ceiling.
amount that you're allowed.
Okay, this is the maximum.
Showing us our
Yeah.
ceiling on both ways.
Ceiling, and it's not done, our discussion is done yet, so it's not just, we are going to clear 2 hurdles yet. The other hurdles are coming, we need to talk about those, and it may bring your size of your bond down. So, other thing is, what you said, you wanna do more research, at some point, you're gonna have to trust the professionals.
Sure.
So people who do this, if there's a 5.07% rate, which has been historically for this district for the last 12 years, it's probably fairly safe bet, knowing that many of these properties have been benched downward because of recession, and they haven't caught up yet. So it'd be probably pretty safe bet to say 3.5% would be a good rate to use, a growth rate to use. However, I have seen board members, especially when they don't get along with each other, get into discussion of, well, 2% is better because I say so, you can do that. But I would say at some point, you're gonna have to trust the experience and advice of professionals.
Oh, absolutely. No, I was just asking because it appears that the $30 is a hard and fast number for us being an elementary district. But then the rest of this, I was just trying to understand it.
Okay, so are we clear so far? So here we have 49 million, but 49 million may give you 3 scenarios, and you can do more aggressive rate. You can say, well, 4%. And then you go a little bit higher. But yeah, we want to keep some moderation. You don't want to get carried away, because what happens is that if your tax collection is not adequate to pay the bond, interest and principal for that certain year, then you may have to dip into your general fund to do it, or some property, or do something which you don't want to do. So now, the interesting thing is, you need to look at your voter demand, where are we? You have about 55%, 45% of your community voters are 55 plus, right?
52% are 55 plus.
Yeah, 55 plus. What that means, you're gonna have a lot of empty nesters, and they are always hard to campaign. You're also gonna have people who have benefit from this community, but I got mine, and I'm not willing to pay forward, so that's so your campaign will be tough. That tells you your campaign will be tough. You have younger voters who generally are more tax friendly. And then you have, the good thing is you have 45% Democrats who are generally more inclined to accept taxes than the Republicans are, generally. Different communities have different things. The other part is that you also need to see what you want to go do what election. If you go to primary election, and I'm sticking with Prop 39 for now, because for general obligation bond, 66.6%, you can do any time, any given day, with any configuration. So that's not, and then you take your chances with the community. Here you have, look at these long blue and gray bars. The blue are the general election. This means your primary has low turnout. However, it depends. It depends who's going to be showing up more. If we get to California primary in June, and Bernie Sanders and Clinton are neck to neck, and California election matters, we're going to have more Democrats showing up, and independents. And if we have other way around, if Republican primary for some reason is still deadlocked, you will have more of a Republican coming up. So generally, one good thing about older population is that you cannot improve their rate of voting. They already are at the top. So if they're going to show up against you, they're going to show up. If they're going to show up for you, they're going to show up. So this means you have a lot of improvement you can make in the lower age groups. And if you have a female candidate on the election, you may have a lot of women turnout. Women are generally more inclined to pay for schools. It is hard. So you need to look into those things and then decide which would be your. Now, if you decide to do Prop 39 bond, and you don't want to go in 2016, then you have to wait until 2018. Now, once you decide that you have a certain need, then one thing I want to address before you move on, whether you want to do bond for 10 million or 49 million. Polling is aside, because the polling would go down, your acceptance rate will go down with a higher rate. Even if the tax rate remains the same, some people have this bias against the higher amount. Although it's not going to impact them because tax is the same. It's psychological effect. So what you do with that, if you are going to go for a bond for 10 million or 49 million, trust me, the pain and suffering and campaigning is the same. You have to do same level of campaigning. You cannot take for granted. If you have your first poll said to you that 73% of people are going to pay for 10 million, and only 59% are going to pay for 49 million. You still have to knock every door, you still have to go to every, there are certain people who are naysayers and just make a mistake generally of trying to spend too much time on them, but you convert them. Good practice is to move on and talk to those who understand or want to help the school district. But the point is, if you decide to go for a bond, I would advise that you look into your total needs and figure out exactly what you need. And if that bond, polling justifies going for that amount, go for it. Just because you need HVAC for 10 million or 13, 10 is the construction cost, right?
10 is a good number.
Is a construction cost,
It's total, 10 million.
including soft cost.
Yes.
Okay, so 10 million, we'll hold him for that. So 10 million, so if it's 10 million, you are going for a
10 million for
bond,
what?
but you are leaving many other,
HVAC,
No.
air conditioning.
and you're leaving many other needs unaddressed, it probably would not be worth doing.
And that's a conversation, we'll talk more later.
Right.
You've said it a couple times, and I don't know, I want to make clear from my point of view. This isn't a bond election about HVAC. We've discovered that, or at least the board has decided not to invest in HVAC until we have the buildings, but that's the tail in the dog.
Yeah.
This is not a conversation about 10 million for
Okay,
just putting an air
okay,
conditioning.
so just, I would not go.
No, and that's not your fault, I just want to give you that context, because it sounds like
Yeah.
you might have sort of gotten that, you know, idea.
I did, so
Yeah,
I'm
it's not just
correcting you.
about HVAC.
Now, the process starts when you decide to go out for bond, after, you do this, and after tonight, you do a different process, and you decide to move forward, then you have to engage a bond counsel, and that the person or persons will guide you through the process, so you will not be getting in trouble. Engaging a financial advisor, that would be also about the same time, because they usually help you with the numbers, what you need to communicate with your facility, with the community. Then you do information campaigning. Information campaign is allowed. You can do information campaign in the board meeting, you can send out information brochure out, as long as your pieces of information do not ask you to vote yes or no. You can talk about needs. So that would be something bond counsel will talk to you about. Information campaign is generally done by this district staff and district leaders, you guys. Then you pass the bond resolution, you do your bond campaign committee sometime, which has to be on non-district time, no use of district resources, no copying done here, no phone calls made, so it has to be an arm's length. You have to also consider your own need. If you have, if you're thinking about doing a special parcel tax, you may want to think about, spreading them out and not do at the same time, because generally, people do not distinguish between money for construction versus money for instruction. They think it's all the same. And then other bonding authorities in the region, you might have other community college district or water board or whoever is going for a bond, then people have a tendency of combining all those tax rates and put them in the same basket, well, I have to pay $300 per my 100,000, and that becomes kind of a issue for them. Generally, people are very, very positive towards school bonds. As long as you do information campaign, you do have a good track record, which you guys do, you have done your homework, which you have done, if you are able to inform them of the need, generally they do, and your PTAs and your site councils are very useful in that. Your principals can carry the, take the lead. But you need to coordinate these things so you would not be taken by surprise. Coordinating with counties have, they have to pass a resolution, they have to approve it, so you want to keep them in confidence, make sure at the county board of education it doesn't do something funny. County boards have funny job, they have not much to do, so they sometimes create work. So you have to keep them in confidence, make sure you take them with you, so they are not just to tell you that who is the big boss, do something funny. Bond campaigning and the election day. If you were to look into November 2016, now somebody asked me, I think here somewhere asked me, if it's too late for June bond. Technically, no. You can pass a resolution in March and do a bond election in June. But I don't know if you have adequate time to do a full, robust information campaign. You may think our community is educated, so they will learn quickly. Learning curve was the same everywhere, whether you're here or at Lexington. I mean, that's the fact. So, timeline in November 2016 election, you will have certain benchmarks to meet. Board meeting, board resolution, conduct a survey. Now, survey will do a poll. People will tell you what survey just tell you two things. One, that answers your question. One issue survey addresses is what they're going to pay for. So you may think it's a great idea, but they don't want to pay for it, and that thing dies on the vine. Or the second thing they're going to tell you how much you're going to pay for that certain things. So technology generally, I don't know, we haven't done a survey yet, but all over the state, technology happened to be at the forefront. In mid-90s, early 2000, when we were doing surveys, there was technology was about number 9 on the list. So how things change with time. Technology is number 1. Safety would be, of course, an issue. Compliance would be another, which you have no control over. You have to do. So this is the timeline we presented. Again, thanks to ISM advisors.
So, a quick question. So I think what you just said about technology being number 1, you mean that came out as the number 1 reason to go after a bond?
Number 1 reason for which community would pay and take tax themselves.
Okay.
Statewide. I don't know, it might be different here.
Yeah.
But generally, remember grandfather who didn't want to work with the computers in early 2000s, now does email. And we give each other iPads and smartphones as gifts for Christmas. We didn't do that 5 years or 10 years ago. So the culture has changed, and people are becoming more information savvy, and they see, when they do it, they see the need. And then the little guy who goes to a family table for dinner and doesn't want to eat because he wants to play a game, he's doing a service to us because he's educating the community with kids on. So that really helps. So we have people who have moved quite a bit on that front. Post-election process, that's selling a bond and using a financial advisor, that decision you have to make down the road, whether you want to have a financial advisor to sell or underwriter. Underwriter buys the notes from you. The cost is a little less, but rate is a little higher. Selling in series to manage tax bond for burden for should be tax burden, not tax bonds. Sorry about that. So if you are going to spend money over 5 years, it would not make sense to sell out 45 million now and just keep it on the money. You want to sell it as your need arises, because you want to delay the tax imposition on your community as long as you possibly can. sizing the series of the bond, then you have a project list. And then that's the work staff has to do after you do the priorities, you tell them what you wanna get done first. They do the projects and then cost it out. The first series may be 10 million, second might be 20 million, depending on where your projects will show up for approval for the board meeting. You would never, however, word of advice, caution, you never wanna approve contracts unless there's money in the bank. Don't say, well, we're gonna approve the bond in June anyway, so let's go ahead and do it. Sizing the series, reporting requirement, that is Prop 39, any other obligation bond, there's some certain requirements which the business office will handle. Oversight issues, we talked about committee already. So that's the process you have to do to get funding for your local projects. As I said, we are going to assume, we're going to have to assume that there's not going to be any state money. However, we need to keep an eye on the state process, any new laws passing, any minutes or regulations passed by the, what you call, State Implementation Committee, makes rules for the state funding, and see where we can take advantage of it. So, that takes me to the last topic. So what we do with all this information? I mean, I've been seeing that a lot, we do this presentation and then everybody kind of, okay, good, and thank you for coming, and that's okay, we go now. So I think the next step, what I recommend from my experience would be, you may want to do a meeting down the road to look at what your needs are and prioritize your things. You know, figure out what is your higher priority, what's your lower priority, and have that kind of conversation, because once you start getting into the bond campaign, it will be hard to do. Secondly, the bond advisor, as soon as you hire a bond advisor or bond counsel and the fiscal advisor, they'll ask you, so how much? So you should be able to say, how much are your needs? And if you have a need of list of 120 million, which hopefully you don't, but if you have 120 million, then you may be, well, 120 million, and then they decide in their mind what is important for you or you don't want to do that.
So Stuart, do you have information for us on an update on our facilities projects, how much money you have left, multi-funds?
I can tell you very clearly what we have on multi-funds, handout, which is prepared and share with you now, if you wish, where we're at. Into a synopsis, which is, we have spent, have invoices paid roughly $5.5 million out of our total 17 million. We've got projects remaining of roughly 2 million. And we have balance to be allocated of about 9.5 million. Those, that 9.5 million can go to the next tier of projects that were developed with the 2013 needs assessment.
Do we have an updated list? Because I always work on this, which was the December 2013 board meeting list. For your time, but was sort of the last
Update on that.
box, school by school, sort of, these are more maintenance things that we're
Right.
saying with
Well,
anything
they've
else.
been mixed because some things we pay for out of the maintenance budget, some we pay for out of the development fees budget, some have been paid out of.
But the 9.1, we have the school climate control, something in the works for that, right, that's not,
We have Prop 39 funds also.
right, but that's going for like the energy saving stuff, but I meant more like the air control stuff that we talked about.
Right, right,
So that's not,
That's not in
so
here.
do you know, do you have
What
like
we
a,
had, originally we talked about probability that would be about $250,000 since we conducted our survey at Glorieta, it's my belief that it's going to be much less than that, probably more like 150
That's great.
Total for all the schools.
for all the schools. Just because it was not as severe a problem as initially was projected. We maybe solved that for something significantly less than a quarter of a million.
For what exactly are you talking about, the
Well-
energy efficiencies, or?
When we, what I call the stopgap measures for air conditioning, that the board, as you recall, said that, we want to do something to mitigate this problem. And well, if it includes portable air conditioners or, screening our glass with the film,
Alright.
fans, whatever it is. So we looked at that again, just at one school. It looked like it would not be quite as dramatic a fix as we first assessed.
For the stopgap
For
measures?
the stopgap measure, so instead of $250,000, maybe it'll be more like 150.
Yeah, but still, that's just the stopgap
That's the
measures, that's
stopgap.
not
The other
to
thing, just-
solve the problem.
For the board, if I can make an aside, one of the items on this Fund 40 list, which is for the playground slope, it's the second one under in progress, shows that 415,000. That, I have a assessment from an engineer that agrees with my assessment that it's not needed. So I looked at that project and I said, why are we doing this? And so I got an engineer to say, well, why are we doing this for $415,000 when it's not needed? So I would be recommending to the board at some point that we scrap that project, which would put another $415,000 into our Pulte funds for something, which, would easily pay for our stopgap measures and some others.
So is that project on hold right now?
Yes, it is.
Which project, I'm sorry,
This is a project at Wagner Ranch where they were going to totally rebuild the area that's adjacent to the creek and putting fences and retaining walls and pillars and.
I just couldn't hear, I'm sorry, thank you.
It's just, we just need to do a little asphalt work.
Really, I think your original question is a good one, though, as someone who
Yes.
wasn't here when Matt was there. Maybe it's time to get the whole list.
Or maybe time to.
And you to assess,
update the
yeah,
whole
do the
list.
same one.
And, I mean, I look at that list and, we did approve solar, which was on there.
Yes.
Windows, without replacing windows and insulation, when I go through and say, okay, these are the things we've already done, or we already
Right.
approved, versus the things that were still to be done,
Right.
it looks like it's around 4 million total. I mean, this was from
That's,
two
that's a
years
good,
ago.
that's a good guess. I have that list.
But that's,
where I was trying
but there might be
work
other
with it.
needs that have come up, and needs might have changed, or certain things might have been done that I don't realize have been done.
I'll give you an example. One we talked about, painting is on that list, but it's not on on this Pulte list here.
Mhm.
Painting is something that everyone has said we must do. The other thing, just as another quick aside, the district really should do poured in place surfacing over the playgrounds, which is expensive, but is now required by ADA that we have that accessible, that those wood chips, the 5-bar, is not acceptable any longer for ADA accessibility laws.
Are we
That's a lot.
going forward right now with setting up painting projects for
Yes, we
summer?
are.
Okay,
We are
so
going
did
forward.
get-
We did get a
You were hoping to
lead,
get this.
a lead survey done, which is
Okay.
now complete.
Okay,
And we will be going out to bid with your approval for bids to do all of our schools and see if the board will approve those bids to repaint our schools.
okay, so we'll see that as an action item coming up.
Yes.
Okay, so we have some things in the works, but we need an updated needs assessment, in my mind at least. This is a little bit separate it's not separate from a bond discussion, but, you know, it seems like a first step is figuring out, you know, to me, you know, these are the maintenance things that we're still in progress and we're in the process of improving over time with that money.
I can prepare, you know, a update of that list from what we have of the 2013 needs assessment. It would be helpful to get some kind of input from board members or others about some of your priorities, how you look at this list. I can make recommendations, but I also think it would be helpful to get some feedback either from the board or from principals or somebody. If,
Yeah,
I've
Julie,
got
I
a
wanted to
sort of
say
second
something
tier,
about this too.
other projects in safety, but it doesn't quite.
Well,
nail it.
I think it's important to go maybe back to the original list and work with the principals, is how I would see it, as, you know, sort of getting an update, because you're right, I mean, certain priorities might have changed, and they might say, you know, we really want to add this, or take away that, or, you know, I mean, I think if we start
I
at the
mean,
school site.
we've got on this list, changing out all the windows to thermal pane, double pane glass.
Right, and that we kind of have always
We've
said.
got
that I
re-insulate
thought-
all the walls of the schools.
Right, so when I came up with my 4 million, I wasn't including those two things. And I wasn't including solar or air conditioning,
And
because those were
that's true,
big.
solar is no longer on this list, there's
Right.
a lot of things that actually 539 is going to take care of.
Right,
And while I'm
that's why I
mentioning,
think the update's important.
while I'm mentioning Prop 39, I have them go back to the drawing boards, as some of the board updates have said. And it looks like, as I, patting myself on the back, thought, we have more money coming to us under Prop 39 than originally was projected.
For the energy efficiencies.
That's right. It's because we did that audit, so we may actually generate some additional funds from the state by having redone that audit.
Good. Sarah, do you wanna-
Well, yeah, so we just heard this presentation, and Total School Solutions did our 2013 update on our master facility plan, and now we're talking about this list, which I agree is more maintenance stuff. So to me, there's a little bit of a disconnect here, and I'm not sure.
Well, you know, that update is a lot of the safety and high priority items that we've already done. You know, I think if you read
Well-
through that, you know, a
Yeah,
lot of
I was
that-
gonna say, there's even, this was 2 years ago? June 2013. There's $26 million estimated here. And, yeah, we've done a good amount of maintenance stuff. But I don't know that that means we've taken care of all the stuff in here.
Probably not, but a lot of, there is overlap between the list that we've been ticking off
Yeah,
items from, like, taking care of all the
Right.
safety items or the high priority items that were coming off of that list, and then we're developed also beyond that list, I think, working with the principals of the school sites, and that's why.
right, well, I thought that that was what the purpose of this study session was going to be, to update us since the last master facility plan in general, and talk about whether we're taking care of our facility needs or the possibility of a bond. Okay, so, I mean, by just looking at this list, it looks like,
So here's a big piece of, that's in there that hasn't been dealt with, portables. right?
yeah,
So
portables.
you go back to portables, you know, we have a lot of portables, you could replace them, you could build buildings, you could replace them with street bound, you could replace them with new portables, we bought out.
We
our
bought a
old
lot.
Portables, you know, our leased
So we've
portables.
got, if I may interrupt, we've got portals in Del Rey, that's room 23, I forgot those room numbers. But that are in horrible shape. And then, you know, they were made in the 60s, and they're pretty much falling apart. And there's some other school sites that we now own these portables, they also either need to be replaced or, you
I
know.
mean, most of the
or
ones
century, you could put in I can envision a really nice, maybe modular building where those porticos are, that would have a room for classrooms, library, special teachers special ed teachers that, are there on site, so that you'd have a facility that was modern and clean and would, serve the school much better than those buildings that are falling apart. But that's another $500,000 maybe, $750,000 for such a building at one school.
Right.
I do appreciate the connection of the lists are, we have a lot of money that we still have some room
Right.
to deal
And
with,
then
that you have to fit together.
And there are so many other things, are you talking about science labs, rebuilding multipurpose rooms? I mean, there's a bigger conversation than just, improving, replacing windows or doors, and, I mean, that's where, in my mind, we still have, why I wanted to see the connection here is because we do still have a fund of money that we should be using to continue to fix up our sites in the way that, we've started this process and we should continue it. It's more of a question of, at what point do we want to say, we really are envisioning something much greater, and how do we, and that really would require a bond. Is this the year to really try to do that or not? And that's the question that's before us. And I think a needs assessment is something we should be doing anyway.
Yeah, but having been part of this for a while, I was on the board when we had this report come to us from your firm, and it feels like we've had this conversation over the last 3 years since I've been on the board. And, in terms of, we can just keep doing this, keep going through our list and keep fine tuning it, but we're in 2016, and I just want to say, if we wanted to do a facilities bond at all, it makes sense to do it in an even year. So that would be, should we consider it in 2016, or do we consider it in 2018? Well, I just want to say this, because if we're going to consider it in 2016, then in my mind, we don't want to just plug along slowly not slowly,
But
but.
I just said that that's what we need
That's
to
what
do.
we're
Is
here
figure that out. Carol, did you
Okay,
want to say something?
well, I just, let me just finish though. I just wanted to clarify that it sounded to me like where you were going was, let's just update our list better and come back. And I
Well,
feel
I
like
said
the
we need to do
conversation.
that, and I said we also
Yeah.
need to think about the bigger picture and whether
Okay.
we want, because I think a bond in my mind would be for some of those bigger things to really, innovate and improve the schools. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what I said.
I just didn't want us to go slowly through this process, and then before we know it, it's too late to even consider that. So
That's why we're here, in the middle of a busy time, you know what I mean? We're
Okay,
pushing
but
it.
it's 20 minutes late, we're just getting to this point.
Yeah, I think it's important to consider Wilder. And one thing that surprised me when we were driving around one of the candidates was there's a lot more houses there than I thought there were. And we saw a lot of kids. And that thing, it's hardly developed out yet. When that thing gets fully developed, it's gonna really impact the school district, so we've gotta have some kind of plan.
Something that came up in conversations during the election, and I'm not sure we ever heard a full answer for it, is that in the Wilder plan, there originally was a whole school site, which they changed around, but there's still property set aside, or at least that's what someone on the planning commission was saying. I think we should figure that out, what there is over there in terms of, not that we're gonna build a new school, we're not, but I think
Not
that's.
today.
But, if that thing gets fully developed, how many more students does that
Study that.
project for us?
I'd like to dare to say something, which is that the Common Core and the new kinds of educational things which Kathy is very familiar with, there are a lot lot of schools out there that are incorporating in their designs some new things that, you know, take into consideration technology, the way spaces are organized, the way classrooms are
We've seen a
put
lot of
together.
different furnishings.
The
Yeah.
furnishings, the tech for, you know, interactive walls, and a lot of 21st century, really 21st century stuff. You know, and as an Orindan, I think it would be outrageous if we had, you know, one such kind of classroom building as each school site. That would just be awesome.
So you're saying do that as like a modular?
Yeah, it's a modular kind of thing at each school. You
I mean,
know,
ideally,
maybe,
you would
you know,
incorporate
this
that
is,
into every classroom.
and this is.
Replace
But are you
Somebody
suggesting
else.
that we might have enough primer money to do that at the
If you-
sites?
You know, if it just
1%,
throwing out a number,
yeah.
$1 million a campus,
Yeah.
you're talking $5 million for some amazing building thing. You know, and this
Shows
is-
people
This
what-
is a vision issue, it has to do with vision, before just talking about vision. Here's a vision. Might cost a little more, may cost $1.5 million per school site, I don't know.
How many classrooms?
I don't know, four or five,
Each campus,
yeah.
$1.5 million?
Something like maybe two, let's say two. So two, it's 10 million.
Can I throw out a comment on whether to go to a bond this year or not? I'll tell you what my primary concern is the vision thing, that to sell it to the community, we really do have to have a clear vision. I mean, everyone lives through their own last battle, and having lived through the roads committees, I think there are a lot of lessons to watch in those votes. They lost many times because they tried too big, they didn't communicate well, and they didn't reach out to communities that typically say no, and they were overconfident. And then they did it with an incremental approach. Whether that's the right approach or not, I have no opinion, other than we have lessons to learn from that. And I'm a little worried that we don't have the time to do that, and we have a really crowded ballot. I'm all for, personally, I think we need to do it. I think we need to, our schools, you know, I've said it many times, 30 years ago, the schools are the same that I went to, and they shouldn't be for my kids. But I'm worried about this ballot, and I think we have to come to grips with that.
That timeline sort of freaked me out.
Yeah,
Well, it's also the cities looking at the roads.
yeah, mother.
Right, or
Yeah.
so, I mean,
Yeah, they've
I
already
think
polled.
part of the issue is we need to sit down, you know, I would like to, if the board's okay with that, like go and actually talk to, you know, Victoria or Amy or somebody and, you know, really, I mean, I think we have to be really cognizant of what the city's doing and not, you know, and coordinating things and not just trying, and I think it's very interesting, you know, to say, oh, you know, there's gonna be, you know, likelihood a state bond measure on there, and if we, I mean, I think getting on the June ballot would be
Yeah, no,
way
that's
too soon.
nearly
Yeah.
impossible.
That's-
Yeah.
So November is going to be a very crowded ballot, and I'm just really concerned about that, and your turnout would be high because it's a presidential election. But I just worry about how many taxes and bonds are gonna be on there. Not that
Yeah.
there's ever a great time.
Well, Jason, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we need time that we don't have right now, frankly, to listen to people like Stuart say, this is a vision that I have. And we have a new superintendent coming in that has a separate vision. And I think that we need time for that to kind of settle down, and for the new superintendent to really get to know the district, so that the new superintendent's vision can help us. And I,
You know, and maybe you know, can take a little more time and aim for 2018 and develop that vision and use some of our funds to maybe use pilot something amazing. Maybe it's at OIS because that's the one middle school, I don't know, I'm just saying, you just. But you know what I'm saying, I mean, maybe you do something that, you know, to show people what could be,
Yeah,
you know, with some of the funds that we do have, but have the time to develop that vision and that plan, that, you know, I just don't wanna be in a situation where we're just racing to put something on the ballot
And then losing.
because everyone is, or something. I mean, we know we have needs, and we know we need to do something, but.
I just want to
So-
do it right.
Yeah, I just wanna add, as
I mean, it sucks to wait
Jason,
2 years, but-
what's that?
I said it sucks to wait 2 years longer, you know, but.
Yeah, and I don't know that, we're gonna have, well, hearing that we have the cap of $30 because we're an elementary district or whatever, you know, there is a cap. So even if we came up with the grand plan of what we wanna do, we can't go out for as much money as we need in one bond, because that's just not gonna happen. So, and Jason referring to the roads committee, I worked on the roads committee too, they had to, you know, they're doing it in pieces. They did a piece of it last time, and that's why they're, just did another survey. I got called from their survey myself. I did see, our mayor recently, and she said they were, looking at June. I don't know if it's decided or if she's saying that's the way they're leaning or something. But that's what she told me, and that was last week. So, I mean, and I know in the past we've always made sure not to be on the ballot at the same time the city has when we've gone after parcel taxes. But if they do go in June, then they're not going in November. And yeah, there's a lot of taxes that are gonna be on the ballot. You know, I just am concerned about, you know, by deciding not to explore it in 2016, we're basically deciding to wait till 2018, and we've had a lot of community members asking for air conditioning and technology. And it was interesting to hear him say technology actually gets the biggest, the best response on a survey. So, I mean, we could, the thing I was thinking we could do if we were comfortable with it is, you know, and having just a side note, at our last December CSBA conference, you know, hearing about facilities, and I talked to a couple of the election consultants who were there, and, you know, we could hear from somebody who's an election consultant. They are the ones who usually put together a poll in terms of, you know, the pros and cons of considering it in 2016 versus 18. And if we, even if we decide to wait till 2018, you know, what's a good process for us? Because, you know, like I said, I feel like we've been, you know, plugging along at this for 3 years since I've been on the board, and, you know, this is our second master facilities update, and we haven't gone out for a bond in 20 years. And just because we're almost done with our priority list doesn't mean we've accomplished all of our needs. We have over, you know, 50-year-old schools. So I was going to suggest, you know, asking for some, you know, asking for, and one of the consultants to come and talk to us at a future meeting, who do, you know, like Lafayette is doing. I don't know if you all saw that, it was a long Orinda weekly last Wednesday, that Lafayette just did a poll, and they're considering for Lafayette School District going out for a bond. So we could, you know, talk to either the same consultant who's doing that and talk to them about the pros and cons of 2016 versus 2018, and then make a decision at that point. That seems like it would be more informed than just feeling like, well, we should just keep researching our projects, because that can go on. I don't know, I feel like we're not ever gonna be able to come up with a master plan to rebuild all our schools and go after a bond to do that, or anything close. You know, we're gonna have to do it in, I'm sure, 2 steps to just upgrade a lot of the needs that we would have.
Teresa, did you have anything on parcel tax information? Well, I I know, you know, one concern is, you know, whether we would need to go out for another parcel tax at some point, and how would that play in to, you know, going out for a bond. So,
We do have 2 parcel taxes with no end date, and we're getting about 3.7 the last couple of years, 3.8 this year. And the need is for the instructional side of the house to help with class sizes and retain skilled, qualified teachers. Based on my multi-year, we do have a slight deficit after we have settled all the contracts out on the third year. So it's about 200,000. So it's a reasonable deficit. It's not anything outrageous, because we could look at our budget for $200,000. But there is going to be a point where these 2 parcel taxes, which were 2002, 2008, $509 per parcel, will not sustain the needs that they're currently being used for. I
in a
could
sense
see
that
another
is
parcel
good,
tax.
but no escalation, so it decreases in value over time.
Quick question, when you said the third year, there would be a deficit, which year is the third year? Third year from now?
Yeah, when I did,
Oh, the third year of the contract, so that was, the third year
my
was
multi-year projection.
16, 17.
15, 16, 16, 17, 18.
Oh, 17, 18.
So Julie, as far as the bond goes, you know, I think 2016 presidential election is a rush job, and I honestly, I don't think it's doable. I wouldn't want to invest a lot of time or energy in something that's not going to happen. I don't think it's realistic. I think if you look at Lafayette, my understanding is that they're not going to try and go on the November ballot, just because the November ballot's going to be a real tough ballot to get a bond passed. We have a couple things working against us. One is that we haven't spent the money we currently have in our facilities budget. And traditionally, to hear, Joe, our past superintendent, always said that it's tough to pass a bond when you're still sitting on $9 million in facilities money. So I do think that's something, you know, I do think that is the logical next step. And we've identified needs, and it's time to continue to work on that. I think creating a vision, and I also agree with what Carol said. My thought is it's really important to incorporate our new superintendent in this process. And I understand that's going to put us off, but personally, I think we've missed November already. You know, I hear a lot out in the community that people are waiting for the next recession. That, you know, we look at our property tax bills, we look at your property tax bill, and there are a lot of assessments on there. And we have high school bonds, and we have high school parcel taxes, and we have elementary bonds and elementary parcel taxes. And I think it would take a lot of work to get it done in 2018. I don't think it can't, I don't think it's insurmountable, but I do think November 2016 is insurmountable. And I think any energy we put into it right now would be, to try and shoot for November 2016 would be wasted energy. The other thing we haven't talked about, Tahir touched on it, is to pass a bond, it takes some significant community leadership. You've got to have people that step up. You need, I don't know what the number is, you need 3 or 4 people who are willing to step up and work 40 to 60 hours a week for 6 months to get a bond passed. I mean, I remember how much the teachers helped for our last parcel tax election. I remember sitting in those phone banks alongside teachers making those phone calls. And I remember, on election day, there were hundreds of us out there knocking on doors and leaving door hangers, and then going through the list of who hadn't voted yet, and contacting those, calling people on their cell phones to make sure they came down and voted. It's a huge undertaking, and the biggest part of that, I think there's there are 500 of us or 1,000 of us that are willing to do that piece, but the hard part is to find those 3 or 4 people that are willing to truly lead that campaign.
I really think we would find those people, because those people are out there.
I do too.
But I agree with Carol that, you know, it's such an opportunity for us to work with the new superintendent on developing a real vision, and I do have concerns about how much money we still have. And, you know, maybe we could do what I was saying and have some, you know, really impactful, you know, things done with this money too. So I think, Jason, did you wanna, I mean.
No, I agree. I actually think, I think the same. I think that it would be very difficult.
And everyone's running away from the November ballot.
Yeah, it's just gonna be a really crowded ballot. I'm actually worried about that recession too, and that it's gonna happen in 2018, but you can't guess the future. I really like the idea brought up that we have a chance, while we've done a lot of thinking of where this money can be spent, the idea, I think community members rightly think we should spend the money we have before we ask them for more money. And we can show them what it's gonna look like by doing some really nice stuff. That's, I think, something new that's come up here, and I'd love to see how that would fit in this budget. Because I think it's important to show them that. I mean, I'm not opposed to us even doing some polling so that we understand more where the community is, because we don't necessarily. Right now, it's all through hearsay, so I don't mind having a consultant tell us a little more about what the community's telling us about school bonds, but I definitely think we should do that, because it's gonna be a platform for what we're gonna do in the future. I also, you know, there's one other thought, is, okay, well, do we try to do something incremental on this ballot to prime the pump? But I think that the obvious we can't do. Air conditioning came up before, and I said what I said. We can't go out and ask for air conditioning now, because if we got the money, we wouldn't be able to use it, because we have to do so much to the buildings to do it. So I don't see the short-term thing we could try to do this year. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, well, that's where polling would come in, is you find out if there was support for it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I understand everybody's thoughts. I just want to say, having worked on parcel taxes multiple times, and I agree with you, Matt, that parcel taxes are a huge effort. The only bond measure, though, that we've gone after in Orinda since my kids have been in school here has been the Ocklanis one, and there was very little campaign team for that because it was 55% and they went on a November ballot. So I don't think we should assume that a bond measure is the same as a parcel tax in the amount of effort. It is still a lot of effort, but it's not the same as getting a 2/3 vote. But with all that said, you know, if we, and also to acknowledge the new superintendent coming in, you know, my understanding was you don't actually have to pass a resolution and put it on the ballot until August, so there would be plenty of time for her to weigh in, even if we just did a poll or, you know, had a little bit more exploring now for 2016. But aside from that, if we're gonna wait till 2018, my feeling is we may end up deciding that we want to do a parcel tax and then feeling like, well, we can't do both. So, I mean, you know, that's part of the reason I'm encouraging us to think about 2016, because I think we are gonna need a parcel tax, especially, I don't know what's gonna happen with Prop 30. I don't think anyone else does either. And that's gonna come into play by 2018. So, those are all factors, and, you know.
Julie, may I say something? Yep. Does about 69% of the voters vote by mail? So that could be a strength, because you can actually win election before the election day. On the other hand, gives you 5 weeks less to do your campaign.
That's right.
So you are not, I mean, you can do all the campaigning you want to do on November 8th.
Yeah.
It might go
So
the
they vote for
day
you.
before that.
Yeah.
So that you have to keep that in mind too. So it's a good thing, but it also has a downside to it. If you have to do a campaign, you gotta do it in September, so it only leaves you 1 month to do campaigning.
Yeah.
This time calendar of an August campaign committee, I think, is too late. If
Yeah,
we get
only
going
1
much
month
earlier.
left. Because you have a unique nature of the community that is 69% vote by you know, absentee ballot. Now, other part is that about $9 million remaining, that could be packaged to good campaigning, saying, well, we are such a good custodian of money, see, we have held on to what we have, so we can reduce your burden. So, I mean, that could be packaged differently, but generally, you would need more time in campaigning, especially in this community, because if you have older population, which you have, it's just hard to make a move from where they already have been.
And that just reminds me, we might, even if we don't go after a 2016 bond, we might want to consider refinancing those CABS bonds, because that could save us
I have
money.
that on my list.
Okay.
So here's where I think we're at. Sounds like we have consensus not to try to go out for a 2016 bond. I would like to, with consensus of the board, have Teresa look into working with whoever, the consultant, guy, about refinancing our current bond, because I think there's some savings there. I'd like to see what the cost analysis on that is, if you guys are in agreement on that. I'd like to go try to set up a meeting with the city and try to figure out, like, make sure we're all working together on coordinating these kinds of campaigns, so we're not stepping on toes and things like that. And I'd like to.
So we could get first dibs on 2018?
Yes, I think I probably want that one too, so.
Yes.
I just think it's important
Okay.
to have a good relationship with them and.
Yeah, they have another meeting tomorrow night.
And try to work with them, not going to that.
Okay.
And then I'd like to have Stuart work on a needs assessment, working with the principals and at the school sites, and maybe some, I mean, I think, I don't know if you want to weigh in on some more visionary items, and have us as a board meet, really sit down, the superintendents in place, and start developing a vision plan for facilities, and looking at a bond campaign, so we're not trying to scramble to do something, because I think it would take a while to develop a good plan. So if I
And did that include updating that list, what you were just
on
asking
the
Stuart to do?
needs assessment,
Okay, good.
yes, so it's.
Yeah, I would just
updating
like
my
the
colorful
board
list.
at the appropriate moment to review and approve whatever is reconfigured for priorities, so that we're all on the same pages.
And for sure, we'd like to get on, our agenda some of the things that we could be doing now, like the painting and, the air.
Stopgap.
The
Stopgap, but also,
Air.
stopgap and showcase, not that you can tell us anything yet, but, starting to see if there is a possibility for that. I think that's intriguing.
But showcasing like at OIS.
Yeah.
And I just use that as an example,
Yeah.
but, I'm just,
Or at all the schools.
right,
We
we
don't
don't
know
know
yet.
the cost, so.
I've got a couple of small tidbits of information to share. One is that the governor is remarkably waiting for the Supreme Court decision, I don't even know if it's been made yet, it had to do with whether the teachers' unions could charge this fee, because those funds impact their ability to support the political efforts on bond measures. And if they don't have those fees, then they can't
Has to come
support
out
that.
this
So the
summer.
governor doesn't want to go out there all by himself and try to, get the voters to support some measure. So, but if the teachers union does have their funds and they do go for a bond, I think there are some resolutions that boards are asked to send to the governor at the appropriate moment supporting a state bond measure, and if that state bond is approved, that might position us to leverage that $9 million, because there's a 60-40 ratio of, local funds to state funds, so we could make our money go a little bit further. And I agree with our consultant here that maybe we should get in the unfunded list for projects. That would mean we apply for it, and even though it may take a while before we get, moved to the front of the queue. projects in the queue. So by 2018, or if we get toward the front of the line, then we can, you know, consider putting in bond money we have together the state funds to be able to make the local dollars go further.
So do we have consensus on what I just said as far as directions?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I said I would go up to public comment again.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
I just wanted to note that we have had some technology things on our list, but I think we were a little more restricted in our Pulte money in terms of technology infrastructure than what he described in the Prop 39 bonds, isn't that correct? Yeah, so, you know, I think that technology is gonna be a continuing need, and I just wanted to say that, Stuart, I don't know if this is really updated on technology infrastructure and what we can do or not do, but I just want to remind you that that's, I know, a priority of all the parents groups.
I checked on the line item that's just in progress, there's almost 800,000. That really hasn't moved at all, and I asked Ray what's the story, he said he just hadn't spent it, so he still have 800,000 to go on those items.
On the four technology
Technology,
upgrades.
yeah, that's just the
Phone server,
phone
paging.
server
Mhm.
paging,
Yeah.
that's the sort of
Those are from
catch-all
years ago.
phrase for technology.
800,000.
So does he know why it hasn't been spent?
He's been working on a lot of other things.
Yeah, he's busy. It's not that we don't need to
No,
spend it.
it's not,
Okay, I'm
we
gonna
do need to
take
spend
this
it.
to public comment because we're trying to keep to our timeline here.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Charles.
Charles Shamnogi, President. There's a lot of things on my mind right now. First of all, I want to say it was mentioned that it's going to take a big commitment of staff and also you board members and the community. I want to start with staff. We have a lot of transitions going on right now. We have a lot of curricular changes. I won't take your time to mention all of those, but there's a lot right now on our plate as teachers. Also with the Friedrichs case at the Supreme Court, we're trying to engage members. We have a membership engagement plan, and we're really focusing a lot of attention on that right now. Staff-wise, we have the solar project. We have the stopgap. That's going to direct a lot of, that's going to be a lot of director attention. We have the negotiations. Your team has been doing incredible work, but a lot of work, and that's happening right now, and I'm sure they're exhausted. I'm sure you're exhausted. So I'm thinking about our staff, and I'm worried, you know. I'm also thinking about one of the comments Carol made about the Wilder Project is we've had pretty flat, if not declining enrollment. And, you know, we probably want to wait until parents are a little anxious about, gosh, there's not a whole lot of room at sites. And, you know, and people living in those brand new homes are saying, gosh, our schools aren't so, you know, new. And we're living in beautiful homes. This doesn't make sense, you know, so we might want to think about that as well. I was also thinking about something else I don't remember. Yeah, it's going to take a huge effort, and I think right now for teachers that's going to be tough. Also, with the negotiations, we decided to go with a 3-year contract because we said, you know, we want to make sure that we spend some time having our new superintendent get to know us and our district. There's a lot of communication that we need to work on. Town hall meetings, you know, who do we want to be? What's our vision? A shared vision. I heard superintendent vision tonight, and I thought, no, it's a shared vision. We also want to make sure that teachers give input on taking a look at the needs assessment, not just our principals. But I feel like our principals would also engage us, but I don't want our teachers and staff to be forgotten because we're there every day and we know how our buildings work well for us and how they don't work so well. I really appreciated the presentation. It was an incredible presentation. I've learned a lot. And the most important thing that I've learned is for 2016, it's too soon. And Matt said it so well. It's just too soon. We're going to kill ourselves. And then if it doesn't pass, we're going to be so disappointed and exhausted and demoralized. And then we're not going to want to do it in 2018 because it would be too fresh in our minds that, you know, we worked so hard and, you know, didn't get the a carrot at the end of the stick. So thank you for this opportunity tonight. I was hopeful that we would maybe go out for a bond, but I know now that it's not realistic, at least in 2016, maybe 2018, but who knows? Because I know, Matt, I hear what you're saying. You know, there's a lot out there about the next recession. We just don't know when it's going to happen. So I think some of the things that you mentioned tonight, Julie, as next steps are good next steps. I want to mention too with the you said stopgap and then you said showcase. With showcase, we heard from the presenter tonight that we have to look at whether we're going to do a horizontal or a vertical. And I don't think yet we've decided which would make the most sense. Do you do an amazing showcase to one school, or do you make all schools shine in some way? So at some future workshop or meetings, you're going to have to decide, do you do vertical or horizontal? So, thank you.
Are there any other comments from the public?
I just want to share a tale of two school sites. When we built the new science wing at OIS, which, by the way, is still working really well for teachers. One of the reasons it's working really well for teachers is because teachers had a lot of input in the design of that building. At the same time we were building that wonderful facility, over in Mill Valley, they were renovating their sites, their science classrooms. And they asked teachers for input and then disregarded it. And they will tell you that the result was a big waste of money. So remember that teachers really know what works. We too have a vision of what it's going to look like in the future, what it can look like. And we really want to collaborate with you on that to make the best use of our money.
Any other comments?
Oh, the other thing, because I thought a parent was going to get up and they didn't, and I didn't want to speak for them, but I do want to say that I've heard a lot of parent leaders saying that the community has donated a lot of money and they're sitting on a lot of money that hasn't been spent, and they're really wondering how to spend that money. And I just worry that a bond's not going to pass because people in the community are going to say, but look at our parent clubs, they're raising all this money and they're being told, you know, there's so many strings attached and they just don't know how to spend it and they want to. So I think right now, that's another reason why it's not a good idea, because I don't know if it's all schools, but many of our schools are sitting in some pretty big parent club balances. Thank you.
If there are no other public comments, we are going to adjourn to closed session. I am going to ask if there's any public comment on our closed session item, which is a conference with labor negotiators under Government Code Section 549, 5726.
Is this about the new superintendent's contract? So on that topic, I just want to say before we're in closed session is that I want to make sure that you think about what a teacher and a staff person in Orinda makes. I know that we want to have not only the best and the brightest teachers and staff, we wanted to also have a superintendent that is of high caliber. So I know that's with a price tag.
I will tell you that we are not discussing compensation because this is not a regular board meeting.
Oh, I thought, because I asked, I said you're talking about the new contract, okay.
That has to be discussed in a regular board meeting, so.
Oh, okay.
And before our next board meeting.
So I wouldn't even be able to mention like a potential cash in lieu for health benefits?
It might be
Tonight.
more appropriate to mention it. I mean, you can say it, but we
Okay.
won't be discussing that.
All right, and I'm sure we learned something from, 2 board meetings ago talking about the whole cash in, well, not that it was seen in the contract as a cash in lieu, but it was extra compensation for health and benefits should a superintendent decide to take that. And if not, I just want to make sure that we're careful about that in the next contract, because a teacher can't use their full cash in lieu. It's only a fraction of what they would get. They don't get the $1,400 every month. They get $137, I think, per month, and that will not count towards their defined benefit. So I just feel like we need to treat each other similarly, So that's what I have to say about that. And also, today I was talking about the specifics of the interim superintendent's compensation and any support that may need to take place from others for the position that our curriculum director currently has. And I don't know that we know anything specific, but I dare share some things with a few of our board members by phone. I just want to make sure that you're thoughtful in that. Well, you always are thoughtful, but to really be thinking critically about that as well. I know there's a savings from Joe taking an early retirement, and I think that potentially could be the money that pays for the support necessary, but I think that you really need to think through that. Kathy did a great job with us today, and we agreed on a lot of things, and she'll share that with you. She's got some great ideas, and she's coming up with a plan of what's going to be needed, so she'll help lead you in that discussion. Thank you, Kathy, for meeting today. I appreciate it.
Are there any other public comments on our closed session item? So now we're going to adjourn. Closed session.
We going upstairs?
Julie, we staying here or go upstairs?
Let's move.